Hello and welcome back to another EDH deck design video. Today I'm going to be showing kind of one of my little junky thematic decks I've been working on. It's almost done. I'm missing about 5 cards. I technically have them, but if you're looking, this entire deck is almost completely in Russian. So 5 cards, while I have them, they're just not in the correct language. And also, if you saw my Dimir watermark, or my Rakdos collection, or my Urbrask, the Hidden Phyrexian deck, you'll know I have a fandom for like the guilds where you can make an entire deck based off their watermarks. So this one is probably one of the absolute weakest ones to do it to, but I am a Grixis. I just love Grixis colors, so I have the black and red one, I have the blue-black one, I might as well make the red and blue one. I was not actually going to do this because I know how completely weak this one is compared to the others, but 2 things happened. And actually within about 48 hours, I was searching around for a Russian Acroma for one of my decks, and I saw this on eBay, a nifty little Russian precon. And shortly after, I saw one of my friend's trade binders where they had, of course, a Russian Goblin Test Pilot. This card is just absolutely classic. I won't speak on the flavor of a Russian test pilot, but because I saw this card in conjunction with that precon, I decided to give this a go. I've actually been working on this for quite a few months. It's very hard to collect some of these. So let's get the obvious possible generals out of the way. Melek came as a promo. I don't really want to run him, but the 4 generals of this guild, 4 potential generals, we have Melek, who, if you don't know what these do, I might have to actually translate some of these. Melek lets you play with the top card of your deck revealed. If it's an instant or sorcery, you may cast it from the top. If you do, you copy it. Tibor and Lumia are essentially a 3/3 that really needs flying on its own to be good, because without that, it's kind of weak. What she does, he, she, them. If you cast a red thing, you burn everything for 1. If you cast a blue thing, target creature gets flying into a turn. So if you cast a blue-red thing, pop them in the air. Really good if you can give her Death Touch, and then do a massive burn spell, but of course without naturally flying that hurts. The Fire Mind over here is one of the absolutely most well-known generals because of combo with simple things like the enchantment where you can, when it connects, you draw a card. It just says whenever you tap him to do 1 damage, and whenever you do damage, or whenever you draw a card, I'm sorry, you tap him and you draw a card, and whenever you draw a card you burn. So if you just hit the enchantment on him, it gets a lot better. Now, what I usually run in this one is the Draco Genius, because this guy puts a lot of targets on your head. And this guy, while he's clever, it's not enough in the deck to make use of him. This one looks a lot, well, it's a pretty strong, it's probably the best win condition of the deck. It's just a beefy dragon. And the slow burn and potential extra draw, since I can't bust this one as much as this one, this tends to be the general I choose. But let's go through the creatures. I will put the absolute most important creature past the dragon first. Right here we have a Niv-Magus Elemental. What he is, 1 for 1/2. He says you may exile instances, or he essentially exile a spell you control off the stack and give him +2/+2 counters, or 2 of them. Why this is good is there's 2 essential mechanics that the Izzet League has. The new one is Overload, which I'll get to shortly. It just lets you choose all possible targets. The older one is Replicate. And what that Replicate means is I may, for the spell I'm casting, if it has Replicate in the spell, then I may pay its mana cost for copies of that spell. Why that's good with him is there's a few, well, there's one very important 1 mana costing Replicate spell called Gigadrowse, but there's a few that cost 2. What that means is I can make him very big very quickly. Gigadrowse in this guy usually means I have a gigantic beater. And if you're not familiar with, again, the other theme decks I made, the power level of these decks are very low. So having a potential giant beater is actually really one of the best we can get. Let's go on down the list. We have Blister Core Weird. Whenever you cast instant sorcery, he gets +1/+1. You may untap him. Then we have the new Guild Mage, the Nivix Guild Mage. He said the first ability is to, I think it's draw and then discard. And then the second ability is I get to copy a spell I control. This one is situationally better or worse. It lets me either copy a instant or a sorcery, but they both have to have the mana cost below 2, or 2 or less. Electromancer lets my spells cost 1 less. Frostborn Weird is a generic pump, +1, -1. Galectrode, one of my favorite cards. He just taps to do 1 damage to target creature player. When I cast an instant sorcery, I untap him. So he's fun to get multiple triggers on. Of course, there's the Test Pilot. This is just classically one of my favorite cards printed. It's not a good card, being that he can kill himself. What he does, he's flying for a 0/2, and you can tap him to do 2 damage to a random selectable target, player creature. Most of the time when he comes out, there could be like 10 or so targets. He actually almost always hits himself, and that's just the funny part. Izzet Static Caster is a flashy. I can tap 1 to do 1 damage to a creature and all creatures that share the name. We Dragonaut is a classic in a few Izzet burn decks where it's 3 for 1/3 flyer. When I cast a spell, he gets, or an instant sorcery, he gets +2/+0 until end of turn. Nivik Cyclops is one that is not just yet Russian. This is something I plan on getting. It's just these are hard to get. Goblin Flectomancer is another one of my favorites because I can sack him to retarget a targetable spell. Going down the list here, we have a Steam Cord Weird. This is one of the probably situationally best removal spells, but it only does 2 damage. If I use red and mana cost burns for 2. We have a Torch Drake, a flying with a weak fire breathing. A Petrohydrox, or however you pronounce this thing. This is terrible. 4/4/3/3. If anything ever targets it, like Staffing In, it bounces to my hand. So I have no way of really abusing this. And I'm not going to remember the name of this card very well. I love this card. It's essentially a 1/5. Whenever I cast an instant or sorcery, I can switch his power and toughness. Oh, Flux Charger, that's his name. I love this in foil. I've been trying to get a Russian foil one because the art on this card is fantastic. We have one of the worst creatures ever printed to date, in my opinion. It's the Ogre Savant. If I were to pay blue, he bounces a creature. So 5 mana for possible bounce. We have... thinking of all the names here. Is it Chronarch? I think yeah, that's the Chronarch. When he enters, you get an instant sorcery back. So this is really good if you can play with things like Ghostly Flicker, but that's sadly not in the deck. The Mercurial Chemister is fantastic. Blue tap draw 2 is fantastic, and he's actually probably our better removal now I'm thinking about it, because the other ability is pay red tap, discard a card, and burn purge, convert mana cost. We're running out of creatures here. We have the Hypersonic Dragon, which gives all our sorceries the ability to cast at instant speed. And then the flying on is really good as well. And finally, we have our Jin. This is the first... All of the themed cards, the mechanic cards of the guild are in the spells, except for this guy. He gives all of our spells replicate, which again is very important for that one creature here. Well, we want to make a gigantic creature, but he's also just a flying. Again, replicate is I may pay the mana in the spell to get copies of that spell. So, for example, if I wanted to... Well, let's just get next to the spells. Let's go on to instances. For example, if I wanted to replicate this spell, it costs 1 red. I could just pay... Well, this one just costs red. I could pay an extra red. But that's bad because this also has Overload. This spell is called Weapon Surge. It does 1... Or it gives target creature I control plus 1/0 and first strike until end of turn. I can overload it to give all my creatures that. Then we have the Dynacharge, which just gives all my creatures plus 2/0 into turn. Same thing, I can overload it. Electricity is really good, just gives 1 damage to target creature player, or 1 damage to target creature I don't control, and I can overload it to do 1 to all creatures I don't control. And Gigadrowse, this is the one that I really like seeing with this, because it has Replicate. Replicate for 1 blue. So essentially, for each blue mana, I can give this guy that many times 2 +1/+1 counter. I can make him gigantic. So something like this, what this naturally does is it just taps something. This one is an overload, gives something +0 and +1 toughness and hexproof. Bluster Squall, I believe. Yeah, Bluster Squall gives something -4/0 until end of turn. Oh, wait a second, that's not right. I know it's Bluster Squall. No, it's tap something I don't control. I'm thinking of the next one coming up. Downsize is -4/0. Then, of course, we have Cyclonic Rift. Everyone knows what that does. Right here we have Pyromatics. This is not a very good card. It does have Replicate, but I can only do 1 damage to target creature or player. So 4 mana to do 2 damage. It's not that good. And we have a Leap of Flight, which is +1/0, first strike and flying into end of turn, and I can overload it. I've been looking for a non-promo one because I like set symbols that match. This one looks nice, but if I can, this is Izzet charm. I can counter non-creature. I can, unless they pay 2, I can burn a creature for 2, or I can draw 2, discard 2. Let's see here. Thinking of names. Chemist's Trick, yeah. This one gives target creature I don't control -2 and 0, and I think they can't block. I'm pretty sure it also says they can't block. Either way. Then we have Thunderheads. It gives me 3/3 weird defender tokens to end a turn. Well, technically until the next end step. But I can replicate. Dragon Shift is fun. I can make all my creatures 4/4 flying dragons, or just a target one. Electrolyze is probably one of the better spells known here because it's just everywhere in Modern. Do 2 damage spread and draw a card at instant speed. Oh god. Just the actual pronunciation of this card is ridiculous. This one actually, Motivates. I can't pronounce the normal card. It's ridiculous. What it does is target creature gets +4 and 0 until a turn. Another one gets -4 and 0 until a turn. Motivates, I think. It's just, that pronunciation is weird. Cerebral Vortex. Target player draws a card and then burns for the number of cards in their hand. Counter Flux is just counter everything. And it's got Overload to counter the stack. Then we have... Oh, that's not Essence Backlash. That's the next one coming up, I think. Yeah, this is Essence Backlash. This is the one that counters a creature and burns per the converted mana cost. And then this one is Thought Flare. I was getting these two confused. These are just not commonly played cards for obvious reasons. Thought Flare. You draw 3 and then discard 2. No, you draw 4 and then discard 2. Street Spasm just burns target creature I don't control without flying for X. And then finally we have the oh shoot, Mind. It's not the Firemind's Foresight. I'm not going to remember this one at all. That's not Invoke the Firemind's the X spell. Yeah, I think it's Firemind's Foresight. Anyways, what it does is I can tutor for 3 cards. They have to be spell instances that cost 1, 2, and 3 respectively. There's a few combo decks that run this, but it's Firemind's Foresight? Now I think Invoke the Firemind's the X spell, so that's got to be the Foresight. Playing this is of course ridiculous since everyone's going to ask what these cards do, and I'm going to forget half the time. Let's go into the sorceries. Vandal Blast is a very well-known card. Shattering Spree used to be the pre-Vandal Blast. Some people still run both. What this does is I destroy target artifact or all artifacts I don't control, and this one is Replicate or Destroy Target Artifact. Again, this is something I cannot multi-target very easily because I'm casting copies. But again, this is another 1 mana costing Replicate spell that I can play around with the Elemental guy. And this is a situational card. I can make it a mountain, a 3/1 that stays permanently a 3/1, and I can replicate. So this is cool if I can somehow burn them with like Mizium Mortars, but I can also make my own mountains 3/1s. This is a really situational card. I don't have any ways of abusing it in this deck, but it's a filler. Mizium Mortars does 4 to a creature I don't control. Oh, sorry. 4 to a creature I don't control, or all of them. Let's see here. Train of Thought? Yeah, I think it's Train of Thought. Where you just draw a card to replicate. Slow draw. Teleportal lets you get through unblockable. Put 1 and 0 and target creature can't. Or it's unblockable this turn or overload for all. This one lets you. Stitch in Time is take another turn if you win the flip, essentially. A Vacuum Melt is just a whole bunch of bounce. This one is another situational card. Mimeo Fracture. This probably shouldn't be in the deck. I'm missing a turn and burn. I can't get 1 in Russian, and I forgot to get a filler, so this will probably be a turn burn. What this does is it lets me get a copy of someone's permanent out of their deck. This is essentially ramp, because in EDH, obviously this is a singleton format, so I'm going to try and target their basic land so I can get an extra land. We have Blast of Genius, which lets us draw and discard and burn per the one we discard. Epic Experiment is the next card I cannot find in Russian. It's just your X spell of the deck. It doesn't really do a lot in this deck since I'm not packing a lot of burn spells. And yeah, this is Invoke the Firemind. This is what I was getting the other one confused with. It's an X spell where I can draw or burn for X, and it's usually going to be draw. There are 2 possible enchantments I could be running. I'm only running 1. The other enchantment is, if I had the turn and burn and this card, I would have exactly 102. So I'm running 36 lands. This card is unique. I'll go ahead and talk about it right now. In the original set, if you look at that watermark there, obviously this is a blue and red card. but it has the Gruul watermark. This is a typo, a quote-unquote typo, a misprint essentially from Wizards, where every single version is called Hypervolt Grasp. Every single version of this card has a Gruul watermark. It doesn't really do a lot. It just enchants, and I can tap to burn, and I can bounce it, but it's just, it doesn't do enough, and the fact that it has the mismatched watermark makes me not want to run it. But this one, although Pursuit of Flight is pretty good, enchanted creature gets +2 and +2/+2, and I can pop it in the air with 1 blue. So 2 mana equating to 2+2/+2 is actually really good. Let's go on to the artifacts. There are only 4 to pick from in the guild. The obvious ones are the Signet, the Key Rune, which makes me get a 2/1 creature that lets me filter a little bit. And this is the next card I cannot get in Russian, is a goddamn Cluestone. To be honest, this is something that people just honestly probably throw away. I understand why I'm having a hard time getting this in Russian. If anyone has one of these in Russian, let me know. Because, like, honestly, a Cluestone is like, it is negative value. People will pay you to rip it up for you. It's just such a terrible card. But getting this as a filler, like, I just can't find it. And it's going to cost so much to import it. I actually saw a Dragon Maze Russian booster box. I was thinking about getting it because I had a high chance of getting the Turn and Burn, and I would most likely get 50 of these. But to buy a Russian booster box for 1 to 2 cards, I can't make that justification. Especially when one of the cards is a Cluestone. And then the last artifact is the Mizium Transloquent. It's really fun. It comes in, and I can pay to make it a copy of an artifact until end of turn or permanently. Let's go on to the lands. Now, I'll go ahead and sort out and show you the curve shortly here, but there's only 36 lands. I may up to 37. The curve on the deck is very, very low. We have the Nivix Area of the Firemind. What this does is just tap land. I can tap it, pay the activation there, and I can exile an instant sorcery, or the top card of my deck. If it's an instant sorcery, I could cast it. It's not that good. Well, I guess it's really situational, because I could technically get something off the top of my deck, and I do have the entire turn to cast it. So if I have something like Melek as my general, I suppose I could use this to filter an extra card off. I honestly don't like the activation. But of course we have the Boiler Works. I hate bounced lands. It's just in here to be complete. Then we have the Shockland and the Guild Gate. I do have a Russian Guild Gate in transit, but where I am in the United States, it usually takes about a month to get something in. I chose this artwork because I like this one better. And then this one technically isn't Russian. I do have one of each of the Japanese promo cards in here. So I did try to match as many lands as possible in Russian. The tricky thing there, I'll go ahead and sort these out here. Of course, there's 15 basic, well, technically 16 basics of each type. I chose these 2 artwork. Well, this is one last filler. And then this one is the mountain that goes with the guild. And as many of these as possible in a few fillers. What's hurting me right here is I really like making these match. If I can, I'm going to get all these artworks. It's a very slow roll, but there's just so many mountains that I really like the artwork on. And lands, here's all the extra basics I've essentially collected. I really like this artwork, but what's killing me is there's an Avon mountain in the new set. I love Avon lands, and this particular mountain is beautiful, especially in foil. So I may eventually just break down and mix match to my favorite artworks, or I don't know. The actual trade value of this deck is very low. It's just actually accumulating these cards is nearly impossible. Again, I was super lucky. This thing got printed. And I don't know if the sellers realized, but these actually come with a premium foil land. And if you're checking the prices of just basic foil Russians, foil Russian cards are really expensive, and a foil basic land is actually more than what it took me to get this. And each one of these boxes came with a premium land. I only got 2. Luckily, one of them came with an island. The other one came with a plains I can't really make use of. But, yeah. Also, I just wanted to point out the actual ridiculous mana curve of this deck. When it usually comes to me playing a control style like Counter Go or Permission, this is actually the curve I love seeing. Right here, this is done by mana curve going over here. So we have 11 1 mana costing spells, 14 2 mana costing spells, and 17 3 mana costing spells. the curve gets better after that. There's only about 7 and 4, 5 and 5, 4 and 6, and there's only 2 spells that cost 7 mana. Both of these are situational, not really the best. Then of course we have 3 X spells. But that curve, more than half of the deck is below 3 mana. But yeah, this is the Russian Izzet watermark deck. Again, every single card in the deck has to have this watermark except for the basic lands. I'm not really going to invest in the promo lands like I did in my Dimir deck because I wanted everything to be in Russian. So I'll just hold on to those 2 as an exception. Again, this is a highly thematic deck. It's not a very strong deck. It's probably one of the weakest decks I have right now. If you notice also, I'm not even bothered double sleeving this deck. Again, most of the cards in here are very low in value. And this is more of a shenanigan deck for a specific play group, or maybe even just when I choose to play Drunk Magic, because of course this is going to cause a lot of fun. If you are choosing to do any kind of approach like this, again, I would highly suggest the Boros Guild or the Gruul Guild, because giving yourself access to those Rurik Thar as your general, or Ariella as your general, those 2 generals make the deck essentially infinitely better. I'm relying on this deck right here's win condition is hoping that Draco Genius gets out and survives, or that I can somehow run into like a replicate spell in this guy and it survives. Past that, this is just a very subpar deck. It's more themey, and it's much more interesting to play. Well, yeah. Any suggestions if you've done anything like this? There's not a lot of ways of improving this deck. As you saw, I'm missing a Turn and Burn, and I have the Hypervolt Grasp. Those are 2 cards. There's not enough here. I may go to 37 lands and kick another card out. But yeah, I'm more interested in just hearing fun stories. So if you have any opinions on this, or if you've done anything interesting like this as well, go ahead and share, because this is pretty cool.